So here's a research report done by Dr. King. All the way back in about 1910, the American government was worried, how are we going to feed people? We are running out of land already. We're running out of space. We're running out of arable land. We're not going to have enough food. And how the hell are the Chinese able to feed all those people? Because only 14% of China's landmass can be farmed. Did you know that? That's pretty wild. Only 14% of the landmass of China can be farmed. Something like 60-some-odd% of our landmass or more could be farmed, but we've ruined most of it now. So look at this. He went and investigated Chinese farming systems, and when he came back and did his report to the government, he said, I hate to tell you this, but the Chinese are so much better farmers than American farmers. It's a joke. You can't even quantify it. You can't even measure it, right? So here's a quote from his report. While in the Shantung province, King visited a holding that was 1 2/3 acres where the farmer had 10 in his family and was maintaining 1 donkey and 1 pig, showing for his farmland and a maintenance capacity of 3,840 people, 24 donkeys, and 384 pigs to the square mile. So what that means is when they took his little 1 2/3 acres farm and looked at how much he was producing on 1 2/3 of an acre, they said if we gave him a square mile to farm, he would feed 3,840 people, 24 donkeys, and 384 pigs. Or comparatively, he would feed 240 people, 24 donkeys, and 24 pigs to 1 American 40-acre farm, which American farmers regard as too small for a single family. Okay? If you want to look into it, the book's called Farmers of 40 Centuries, and you'll see Chinamen that built irrigation systems that look just like a stepper. All day long, the kids would be out there doing this and running a crankshaft made out of wood, pumping irrigation water out of a ditch into the fields. I mean, this was labor-intensive. And they were then, in 1910, out producing our commercial farmers by hand. Ladies and gentlemen, don't let anybody convince you that we can't go to organic farming. There's only one reason they don't want to go to organic farming. 2 reasons. 3 reasons. 1, you go to organic farming, you don't sell chemicals. You don't sell pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, and chemical fertilizers. You might be wanting to interest, well, why are we selling so many chemical fertilizers? I'll tell you why. Because after the First World War, they said, what are we going to do with all these ammunition factories? And a guy named Liebig said, hey, guess what? You can actually make fertilizer from the same stuff you make gunpowder. Hey, and they said, oh, that's cool. You can? And so they started a massive campaign to sell fertilizer, chemical fertilizer to farmers. What did they blow the World Trade Center up with? Fertilizer. Fertilizer, a primer, and some diesel fuel will blow anything up. Why? Because chemical fertilizer is made exactly from the same constituents as explosives. So United States converted its ammunition factories into fertilizer factories in peacetime, and in England alone in the year 1956, they spent 24 million pounds marketing chemical fertilizers to farmers alone. Now think about that. In 1956, 24 million pounds would be the equivalent of about 30 million US dollars. Total Gym spent about $30 million to market the Total Gym its first or second year in business, and they sold $100 million in Total Gyms, right? You understand what I'm saying here? You're talking about a marketing campaign that was so ferocious, they made farmers feel like if they weren't using chemical fertilizers, they were idiots, and they did the same thing to American farmers, and now we've got ruined soils, and what does it do? It keeps the drug companies rich. It keeps everybody doing everything but what they should be doing, which is achieving higher levels of consciousness so that there's a fighting chance that we might be able to evolve as a society. What a concept. Thanks. At least I got one fan up here. But for the rest of you that aren't so excited about evolution, let me show you what you're doing to your kids every time you buy them stuff from the grocery store. Here's a research study from New Zealand, by the way, which has far stricter farming standards than the United States or Canada, by the way. The scientists went right into the school lunch line, took the lunch right off the tray, right to the laboratory, and they found 19 pesticide residues, many of which were 10 times the safe limit for a week's consumption, not a day, in New Zealand. And almost every one of those pesticides came from an American company like Monsanto or DuPont. You see, we're effective at screwing everybody up, we Americans. What's the first thing you see when you get off an airplane in a third world country? Coca-Cola Marlboro and Gerber food, right? We'll screw your babies up, we'll poison your lungs, we'll get you addicted real quick, and when you're too busy drugging yourself, we'll take over your land, and presto. And then what do? We build runways on it or something. Okay? Oh, it might also interest you to know that the United States Department of Agriculture, and it's probably the same in Canada, so it's not just the U.S., has approved the use of ground plastic, cement powder, sawdust, sewage and industrial waste, and dead animal remains to be added to cattle feed in feedlots, and they feed that to them right now. And anytime you go to a restaurant or to the supermarket, unless you're buying organic meat, you are buying animals that have that put in their feed. Would you care to wonder why they add that to animal feed? One, it saves them money. Two, it makes the animals fat, because all animals will store toxins in fat to protect the nervous system and the organs from the toxins in the body. So the body will shuttle the toxins into the fat. So these farmers make these animals fat very quickly by poisoning them with these toxins. And they don't, have you ever seen a farmer doing a body fat check on a cow to see how much you could sell it for? No, they won't ever let that happen. They sell the animal by the pound. Nobody cares how much fat it is. As a matter of fact, your favorite pieces of meat are the fattiest pieces of meat. Filet mignon is the fattiest piece of meat in an animal. What does that mean? It's the most toxic-laden piece of meat in an animal, right? And what kind of toxins are they? Two classes: neurogenic, which attacks the nervous system, and hormonal, which attacks your hormonal system. One kills the bug's nervous system, the other one makes it so it can't reproduce. It's basically like putting bugs on the birth control pill. And you eat it in levels that are extremely high, and they say, oh, it's not dangerous, it's not dangerous. Study homeopathics, and then we'll talk then. Oh, it might also interest you to know that all the way back in 1957, Aaron Fried Pfeiffer showed that when you use stilbestrol to accelerate the growth and development of cows, when the meats are analyzed, they're missing some essential amino acids, which I found very interesting. The animals have amino acid imbalances. They do not, it causes them to not be able to produce methionine and lysine. It causes deficiencies in the animal, which is very interesting because none of you are eating meats that weren't raised on these hormones unless you're buying organic. So you actually could end up having an amino acid deficiency. And if you talk to someone like Robert Rakowski or any of these guys like Eric Serrano, some of them actually do analysis of amino acid levels. You can test the amino acid levels in people's brains now. And I know many, many doctors that do these kind of tests, and they find people that are amino acid deficient all over the place, and they're eating plenty of meat if you go by the pound or the gram, but they're not able to digest it, assimilate it, metabolize it, and we may be actually ruining our own meat. Okay, so I'm a little bit over time. I still have a couple things to say, so if you are interested, hang around. It's actually even going to get more interesting, I think. So what are the fruits of commercial farming? Stress, circadian stress, fad dieting, bad posture, poor digestion, overtraining because people are working themselves to death trying to lose weight, overconsumption of stimulant and hyper drinks, people skipping meals because their mental, emotional, spiritual functions always go in sync with your body. You got a sick body, then you're sick emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. We got severe fungal infections. About 90 to 95% of the American population has a fungal infection. Our food quality is the lowest it's ever been, and we're severely overusing aerobic exercise. That's a whole other. I wrote an article on that if you want to read it. It's on Mercola.com. It's called Paul Chek's Perspective on Cardiovascular Exercise, and I basically did the cardiovascular exercise, what I'm doing in this lecture, to the soil.